Gang, what I'm about to say may temporarily confuse you. I'm hastily putting together this pre-intro to what will be followed by a pre-intro that I recorded another time, then the normal intro, followed by the actual show. Well, what does all that mean? Saturdays, normally monologues, yes? Well, can be exceptions to that rule. This is now an exception to that rule. I had JoPatti, live check here again, Monastery. Think monastery, but with a U. JoPatti Monastery on. You're going to see her in a minute. About native tribes and also a second kind of part, DOGE discussions. Well, this week, I'm hastily throwing this intro in, was planned season 2, episode 91 to be DOGE updates. So, okay, rather than record a show strictly on DOGE updates, since JoPatti was at the DOGE hearings, I recorded with her today, looking down, February the 19th, Wednesday, February 19th. We had to reschedule from last week because she was at the DOGE hearings. So, DOGE updates, season 2, episode 91, is now with JoPatti Monastery rather than just a monologue. And please, very important discussions about native tribes, also kind of part 1. Hang around, the DOGE updates, part 2. Show is going to run longer than normal. I apologize for that, but I better stop rambling because I'm just adding to the length of the show here now. So let's get on with the show.
Hello, everyone. A brief special intro to this week's show. You know, Saturdays, I normally have on monologues that are in conjunction with a written article at thelibertybeacon.com. Well, we're working through some issues. So today's show, as well as an occasional other Saturday show here and there, may not be a monologue in conjunction with thelibertybeacon.com as I work to sync and coordinate, juggle before it's news.com, thelibertybeacon.com, as well as now introducing SUBSTACK as an outlet for my articles, needing to try to coordinate and sync them all together, and some Saturdays that may or may not happen. So instead, like today, you're going to get what would normally be a Wednesday guest appearance drop.
Welcome to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP. I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show!
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Constitutionalist Politics Podcast show. Welcome to the show, JoPatti. And we're going to kind of do two parts today. We're going to do a first half, and then a second half I had no idea we were originally going to discuss DOGE related, because she has background in government and with USAID. So that'll be a second half. So wait for that if that's what you're here for. Please don't skip on this important first half, though, that she originally was coming on for. And I'll read just this from my notes, that She has been a spiritual seeker for most of her life, had the good fortune to train with many elders of the Lakota. I can pronounce that one. Menominee, I can pronounce that one. A G word Aboriginals, can't pronounce that word. We'll let her do it. Morai, I think. I don't know if I'm getting that right, tribes. And the again, pardon that I'm bad with the names here. We'll have her explain it. Welcome to the show, JoPatti.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Actually, although my family's original name is Patti, that's my father's real name, he was adopted. So my legal name is Munisteri, also very difficult to pronounce for many people.
That's why I didn't bother. Yeah. And
I tell people,
I'm sensitive to that. My last name, Leonard, no O. They want to say Leonard. I don't have any French background. It's Leonard without an O. So I'm sensitive to that.
yes, and the names of the tribes, for those of you who are interested, is Maori in New Zealand and Gumbaynggirr in the Aboriginal nations
Even
of
though there's
Australia.
two R's on the end, it's pronounced what again?
Gumbaynggirr.
Yeah, it ends in two R's, but it's Gumbaynggirr. Okay. Language can be fun.
Yes, it was translated by the British, and sometimes the R is pronounced, but technically it's Gumbaynggirr. So thank you, Joseph. I just got back from Washington, D.C. So
yeah, and again, we just for behind the scenes. I thank you if you're watching behind the scenes video, BitChute, Brighteon, Daily Motion in France, Rumble, YouTube. But of course, 20 plus audio only shows, so we've got to keep that in mind. You see the Italian in me if you're looking behind the scenes with the hand gesture stuff. But before we go any further, what are the other tribes like the one in the mountains of China that I didn't even dare try to mispronounce?
that's the Shaolin. They're known as a warrior monk society, not necessarily a tribe per se.
Yeah, a lot of this is news to me, even though my wife was part Blackfoot or Blackfeet, depending on which way you want to call it. And we were supposed to try to go out and vacation on a Blackfoot reservation, but it never worked out. It never happened. And I'm divorced now. But so I have those interests and those concerns. But as you could see, and I don't like to do a bazillion things of research. I could have looked up how to pronounce those things. I didn't want to because I'd rather us have the natural discussion and show indeed I'm ignorant of some things and open to the education. Why you're here.
Thank you, Joseph. And a good part of my life has been working with indigenous populations, and most of them I had to learn the correct way to pronounce them, learn some of their language, their culture, their ceremonies, and that's helped me in my personal and especially in my spiritual life, which is, I think, what we thought we would talk about first.
Exactly. Without getting into the DOGE politics that comes later, also have in the notes you saying we have a looming crisis in our country that I call the future poor. And this being a Christian show, I like to often repeat Jesus said, the poor will always be among you. Now, that doesn't beg our responsibility to be our brother's keeper and try to help the poor, but what he was saying was not an economics or a governance statement, but a human nature statement that there will be lazy people who are never wanting to bother to attempt to improve their lot in life versus those who indeed need our helping hand, not a handout. You would agree with that distinction?
I would say we also have to look at the maxim, God helps those who help themselves. And so therefore, I would say, yes, we do have an obligation to share, let's put it that way. However, I also believe
of our own free will through charity, not
yes.
worldly biblical community, which is free will and charity, versus worldly communism, which is theft and force.
Yes, that's a lot of concepts you're putting into one sentence there, Joseph. My work overseas, well, my work in the United States too with Indigenous, I work with people who want to help themselves and have, through no fault of their own, been subjected to circumstances where that wasn't possible, or they were prohibited from doing it.
Some people are actually victims of what's going on. Some people just like to claim victimhood as an excuse for their own worthlessness and not getting anywhere in life. But indeed, as the Bible makes the distinction, again, between the unwilling and the unable, or as you outlaid in some case, that they're at least trying. And we, as being our brother's keeper and our free will, are to want to provide helping hands, not just handouts. I like to talk about Bono of U2. Used to be a major ultra-leftist commie until George Bush came into office, and I have my issues with G.W. Bush. I'm not rah, 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 rah on my side, right? He had issues and deficits, which we'll get into in the DOGE thing and all that. But Bono became part of George W. Bush's continuation of his dad's 1,000 points of light thing, and indeed came to the realization helping hands are better than handouts. You help Africans get a skill so that they can make things to sell things. It helps grow their entire economy and lifts them up, rather than continually just throwing money at them, which isn't helping them, it's just making them dependent. And I'm hearing that distinction in you.
Well, there's also the maxim, teach a person to fish and they'll be able to have food for themselves, instead of giving them a fish and they'll keep coming back for more.
Bingo! Your one sentence did a lot better than my rambling did.
So, Joseph, would you like me to talk about the spiritual practices that I've had personally firsthand?
Sure, that would be great. That would be an insight I have never gotten somewhere. And again, I am a human, frail, flawed, imperfect. I don't pretend to know everything, even though I joke on the internet. I'm not a know-it-all. I just play one on the internet, right? I don't know everything. I'm ignorant to things, but I'm willing to learn, which means I'm different than stupid, because stupid is unwilling to bother to learn. So yeah, please share.
I come from a rich background in terms of spiritual, mystical knowledge, in terms of my grandmothers, both of them, although they were Catholic. My paternal grandmother especially, really, she was a physicist. So she, yes, in the 1930s and 40s, huh? She really was remarkable. And ended up talking to me. I was the eldest of all their grandchildren on both sides. So we had lots of talks about dreams, about God, about the importance of messages that we receive in life, and about our purpose in life. And when I worked with Indigenous populations, which started in my 20s with American, what we would call Native American, I like to call them more by tribal designations, but those people, many of whom had been forcibly converted during the 17 and 1800s by a number of different religious sects, including the Mormons, LDS, the Anglicans, the Catholics, by missionaries, misguided for the most part. And they never saw, most of them never saw conflict. Even the Aboriginal nation, which I'm most familiar with, the Gumbaynggirr and the Bundjalung, they never saw a conflict between recognizing and practicing, for example, Catholicism and their own indigenous. They found the bridge between the indigenous beliefs and the common ground, whereas a lot of people outside castigated them and degraded them if they didn't.
Oh, like we talked in the green room, right? The segregationism, I'm going to use the word tribalism. If you're not my label of Christianity, then you're an enemy. And that's just idiocy, I say over and over. Satan wins when we're arguing rather than the common ground, like we discussed in the green room earlier, that we can meet on. Yeah, their spirituality and our Bible really aren't that far apart, and we can focus on those common grounds.
In addition, when I was in middle school, 8th grade, I had a Penguin version of the Talmud in English. And we are, in our generations back in our family, Sephardic Jews. So my grandmother also encouraged the fact that we read both the Old Testament and New Testament and understand the basis of which Christianity was founded. And later on in my life, well, for a good part of my life, since 1975 to 2024 is the last time I was in Israel, I studied Hebrew. I was in Israel working. And so that is also a very important part of our Judeo-Christian foundation in the United States, as well as many parts of Western civilization.
That this show constantly talks about our Judeo-Christian foundations. It really upsets my soul to see supposed fellow Christians that are anti-Semitic. Jesus was a Jew. Yes. Jesus fulfilled the Jewish scripture, became the Messiah. He didn't say replace all of Judaism. The New Testament and the Old Testament are there together for a reason. He didn't start his ministry himself till age 30 in the Jewish rabbi legal and cultural tradition. But yet some Christians like to say the Jews that conspired with Rome to kill Jesus are somehow today responsible for all that. It wasn't all Jews then, and it certainly isn't Jews now, and it's idiotic to blame any Jewish person for the death of Christ because our Bible tells us it was required to happen. The Jews then were acting within God's plan. It was part of the plan. He had to be killed on the cross to become the final blood sacrifice. So this anti-Semitic stuff drives me insane. You don't know your own faith if you're anti-Semitic.
Yes, it's very dangerous. It's been used throughout history for political gain, for economic gain, for designated people as inhuman. And I don't really want to get into too much of a theological discussion here, but I was fortunate that when I went to Georgetown University and graduated from the Foreign Service School at that time, we were required to have theology, and I studied the Hebrew prophets. I studied, of course, Catholic writings of people like St. Francis and St. Augustine. I'm very interested in the works of the monk, Brother David. And I also grew up, and I still, just recently, I was in Italy. I love to go to the Latin masses. I think that language is more mystical.
And you're a domestic terrorist.
And we also had to learn, I learned Greek briefly, and it's important to know that parts of the Catholic service are in Greek. And those languages one can call mystical languages, like the language of Armenian. I was in Armenia for 2 years, the oldest and continuing Orthodox Christian country in the world, which is unfortunately being decimated by its Muslim neighbors. and by lack of support from the international
the Armenian
community.
genocide is often overlooked. We talk still about the Holocaust, but the Armenian genocide seems, and the fake application of the word genocide today, by again wanting to claim victimhood, refusing to acknowledge the Holocaust, but claim to be part of being genocided now improperly, twisting and warping of language. But yeah, I say all the time, I'm so glad to hear you say this, because Armenian to a degree, but really our original Bibles were in Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. You could go back to the original text and the Dead Sea Scrolls, which legitimize the earlier texts, as opposed to some of the warping we've done with the Bible of late. It's not God or Jesus that's contradicted himself. It's us humans that have mucked things up.
Yes, I lived and worked in Iraq. I taught at the Catholic University in Arbil in Ankawa, and I worked in other programs there until 2020, when we had to leave because of the pandemic restrictions. But in that community, the first language of most of my colleagues and friends was Aramaic, and a Syrian population of Orthodox Christians was decimated there by Daesh, by ISIS. And those people still speak the language of the Bible. And one of my good colleagues, very close colleagues, incredible man, PhD, Dr. Aziz Zabari, he was retranslating. He speaks 5 languages fluently, including Aramaic and English. And there are many phrases that are used that were changed in the 11th century during the Diet of Worms in Constantinople, when, unfortunately, the Catholic Church did not want the lay population understanding everything that they were interpreting. And one of the phrases that I quote to people is used in popular culture. It says, "Judge not lest ye be judged," and they use it all the time.
I cannot tell you how happy I am to hear you say that, because I say that all the time. It's not Matthew 7. There's more to that than just the first 7 words.
Well,
remove the log from thine own eye, but it's condemn not lest ye be condemned, because there are other scriptures that tell us how to properly biblically judge people.
Yes, I was just going to say that it's not judge, it's condemn, and that's very different, because you have to be able,
reserved for the Lord.
Yes, and also you have to discern between right and wrong, between light and dark. Of course, you have to make judgments all the time on a daily basis. But the church at that time, the Catholic Church, thank you, Joseph, the Catholic Church didn't want people making that distinction in terms of their own full spectrum thinking at that time. We're talking about the 11th century, before the Renaissance. And so they put it in the purview of the bishops, because even many of the priests were not literate in those languages. And that also talks about a parameter of thinking that was put on people, that they still, of course, they do it even more so today. So yes, you have to know the full scriptures, but you also have to realize the Rosetta Stone, we know now, was mistranslated by the British. And so there's probably lots and lots of historical documents. I mean, I haven't gone through them, just as I'm talking about certain sections. But certain parts of history that were ascribed, let's say, to the Egyptians were probably mistranslated as well.
Oh, again, it goes back to, God hasn't changed. We are the ones that have screwed things up through misinterpretations and mistranslations. And it's also like the commandment, thou shalt not kill. No, it's thou shalt not murder innocents.
Murder. Yes, it's
murder
very different.
Innocents. Exodus 22:2 alone says, a thief breaks in the night, dealt a fatal blow. You're defending your home and your family. That's self-defense that our law is based on. That's not murder. It may be a killing, but it's not a sin.
Yes,
and we messed that up. And full disclosure, born and raised Catholic, But I say this show is not a Catholic show, a Baptist show, a Methodist show, all the denominations have screwed things up. And my point is we focus on those things. We can relate all the way back to the Aramaic, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. We know our solid, or Satan wins if we keep arguing amongst ourselves.
Yes. I mean, they are translated by human beings, and human beings, as we know, are all too fallible. And also many of those church leaders, leaders in all religions, have deliberately twisted at times for their own power and influence. That's part of a different kind of psychological operation and a different way to indoctrinate in their interpretation for their compliance. So all these factors have to be taken into account.
Yeah, human lust for power rather than glory of God and to God, right? I wrote an article on Substack questioning the God Bless the USA Bible. How much of that is wanting to further God, and how much of that is human hubris and self-promotion of Lee Greenwood's song? Right?
Well,
so, and I didn't say about being born and raised Catholic. I coined the term nincompoop for Francis because to me, he's more interested in worldly communism than biblical community. So again, with that being full disclosure, but we're on the same page. It's various people for their own agendas, not God's agenda.
My personal path has been, still is, of seeking the truth. And I believe that most people, once they actually are, I was fortunate because I had training in all sorts of what would be called spiritual, some definitely religious because the Jesuits ran Georgetown, and we have a very specific interpretation from them. It's very controversial. I won't go into it too much. I talk about it in my books a little bit. I have 2 nonfiction books about my work. We can talk about that later. But I also, my eyes were totally opened by working with indigenous tribes and their ways of relating to God, usually called by different names, Teariki Nui, Tunkashila. Even Allah, people don't realize, is just the word for God.
Aramaic for God, yes.
And Arabic for God, you know.
Yes.
So these, yes.
In the Aramaic language, Allah was there, existed. It's not some made-up term by Muhammad, right, to create a new faith. And I forgot to complete 2 thoughts. Like on the God Bless the USA thing, I think it's a good thing. I want to buy a copy eventually. It's a King James version. Well, how much of what King James did was for the furtherance of God, and how much was it of his own desire for his own personal PR, distancing from all the nasty stuff prior kings and queens did? And we don't know what languages Jesus spoke, but he probably spoke Aramaic, Latin, Greek, and Latin.
Well, probably just Aramaic, because Latin
was... Oh, you think
was
just Aramaic?
Well, because even though the Roman Empire was there during the time, you have to remember the economic class and status that he grew up in. He's not one that necessarily would have had the education of higher status and higher economic status families. Regardless, what I was going to say in terms of the spiritual practices, most people may not know about the Shaolin. They have been in existence for over 5,000 years, codified, written, but their practices have to do with, well, first of all, you take a vow when you train there. I'm a Chinese medical doctor as well. I trained in New Zealand and the United States and in Israel.
A witch doctor. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Well, unfortunately, there are some whole societies and religions, including Islam, that think that, but that's not true. And these practices help you. I talk about, for example, Thomas Merton, if you know his writings. he talks about the idea of meditation and stillness used in the mystical practices. As the best way I can describe it is when you meditate, you're quiet and still so God can speak to you. And when you're praying, you speak to God. And there is a nexus between the two that often people try and divide and say, oh, that's not a Christian practice, meditation. Of course it is.
They try to associate it with Buddhism and Om. I had on Jeff Patterson and the whole benefits indeed of meditation. To try to just dismiss it as hokey pokey stuff because Buddhism is what it's most associated with is that idiotic tribalism crap again.
Yes, because most indigenous tribes that I've worked with, and of course there's hundreds, if not thousands more on the planet, but certainly the Gumbangi and Lakota, they talk about times when you need to, quote unquote, be still, whether it's just sitting in communion with others and not talking, or it's just praying in the sense of sitting still with nature. That quality of being still is very important to hear what possibly messages or warnings or guidance comes. And if you're always besieged, as we are in the world today, with all these messages coming from tech and machines and, yes, screens.
Holding up my smartphone for the benefit of those reading the transcript or listening on audio.
I call them spy phones. That's more accurate. They can cloud your ability to receive that guidance. And what they not only can, they do, especially for children.
We are so much on the same page, I can hardly believe it. I often look for, what can I argue with this guest about? And we're kind of, so far, 99.9% in agreements here.
Oh, that's quite all right. I've just been in a circle of people I've had to bite my tongue, as you will, when I was in DC recently. So in a way, we can shortcut. Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say we can shortcut.
Let's pivot now to you behind the scenes. We are whatever day this show airs. I'm not certain yet, but we are recording February the 19th. We had to reschedule from last week because you were in DC for the DOGE hearing. How did that come about? Let's start. Well, you know what? I never started at the top of the broadcast, but you kind of went there a little. The who are you? You know, where were you born and raised? We didn't get that yet. Let's do that. Then let's go to the DOGE.
Well, I'll abbreviate it because I was born in 1953, so that's an awful lot of time we would have to spend on that. But basically, I was born in the United States. I was born to, my father was born in Italy, and all my relatives on both sides are Italian. And so I'm first generation American. I'm oldest of 6, 4 younger brothers and a sister.
But of legal immigrants. Yes,
absolutely legal immigrants. I mean,
they had to go.
They had to go through.
Says heaven has a wall and a gate.
Yes, and when we became New Zealand citizens, we had to go through the veteran vetting process there too. I'm all for legal immigration if it benefits the country and the people that are applying. I went to high school in Texas public schools. I went to both Catholic and public schools during my life. So I went to many different schools because we moved 13 times before I was 11. Okay. And yes, because of my father's job. And I graduated from.
You weren't a military
brat. Although I come from a military family in the sense that many of my uncles, my mother's father, that grandfather was in the Italian Navy during World War I. My brother next to me in age, Irish twins, I'll use that term, if you know what that means. Some people may not know. He was very close in age, 15 months. So he became a Marine. He was in the Marines for more than 10 years. My cousins are in the military and in law enforcement. So we come from a very service-oriented family, but my father was in oil and gas. He was a civil engineer. That's why we ended up moving to Texas.
Oh, that
And
makes sense. Yes. And
yes,
he
and
would go about, yeah, that like a military brat might go from base to base, even in various countries. That kind of
yes.
industry lends you to go around the states as well as often around the world. So, indeed, what prompted you getting an invitation to the DOGE hearings?
Oh, that's a yes. Well, the background's important because I graduated from the Foreign Service School. I was in special programs at Georgetown and afterwards. I was retrained by the Army in 2011. I worked for State Department. I still do work for special programs since 2008. I've worked with USAID always as a contractor in Afghanistan, in
And we
Armenia,
agreed
and
before we hit
Iraq.
record. Yeah, we agreed in the green room before we hit record. We agree there's some good there, but there's a whole lot of waste, fraud, and abuse to cut out. And the good could be handled by the State Department. There's not necessarily that need for that agency. And again, Christian charity. You want to give condoms to the Congo or wherever, create a charity, a nonprofit, raise your own funds. Don't steal from us, the taxpayers, to do it.
Yeah.
So, yes?
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, part of the problem is that it's our money going to a lot of these programs that, by the way, they will have a title of one thing, but actually what's happening is something completely different.
Complete
I
fraud.
also, yes, I mean, I was very patriotic, very service oriented from high school on. I really wanted to serve. And one good thing about Georgetown during those days, it's changed, unfortunately, but the
Glad you
Kennedy
said that.
Center, the Kennedy Center for Bioethics was established when I was there. We were always taught, for whom much is given, much is expected. And I have used that maxim in my life. And at Georgetown, and I went back to Georgetown while I was there. In fact, I brought a young Iraqi mentee of mine. I'm her mentor. I brought her over to Georgetown to show her Georgetown. She was also in DC. Had that experience. I worked with IREX, the International Research Exchange Board, another cover. USAID and the Peace Corps. I also worked with Peace Corps response in Ukraine in 2015.
Yeah, Peace Corps. Kennedy,
Okay,
right? Kennedy
yes,
and the Peace Corps. A great intention that has been completely bastardized.
Yes, was a Sergeant Shriver, another Kennedy, but not by blood, but by marriage. These efforts in the 60s and 70s, and especially after the Vietnam War, to give back were definitely well-intentioned, as was Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, a quote-unquote non-governmental organization. And people have to understand it's an oxymoron. It's a contradiction. If you receive government funds and you're calling yourself non-governmental organization, NGO, all of these were started in an effort, I think, an earnest effort to be sincere. However, they've been totally manipulated and transformed, and I am personally glad that USAID is totally dismantled. It couldn't be salvaged, in my considered
Good
opinion.
aspects can be done by the State Department. And also an aside, Greenpeace. The original founder of Greenpeace has nothing to do with it whatsoever anymore because it's just become a left-wing talking point, idiocy, partisan thing rather than what he founded it for.
Well, I think this happens often when it starts with a small group of committed people and then it gets too large to manage. And then other people come in and buy the brand, like Red Cross. Red Cross is not a nonprofit. It's a for-profit. It's been commandeered in the Red Crescent for a very long time, as we've seen by the absolutely horrific situation with the hostages and with Hamas attacking Israel, and that the Red Cross, quote unquote, nonpartisan. No, they're extremely partisan, as is in the United Nations, UNRWA, all these aid organizations that are aligned now with terrorists. And so
And as the
think,
author of Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You, I'm absolutely on board with you on that.
yes, I've written articles that were published in Small Wars Journal a few years ago after my specific work in quote unquote education programs and rehabilitation programs for children who are jihadis. It's called Jihadi Generation: Strategies Used for Weaponizing Children. Part one is on boys and part two is on girls. And this has gone on for generations now. It's worse than that. It's worse than just propaganda.
Yeah,
so
propagandized and indoctrinated youth into the jihadism. Here's the important part to put the disclaimer, like I say about my book all the time. Not all Muslims are terrorists. Not all terrorists are Muslim. Okay, my book even goes into the Om Sri Christian cult that engaged in terrorism. So spare me the false pretext of, oh my God, I must hate Muslims. No, I don't. But the different Islamic sects, like Christian denominations, matter, like the Ayatollahs. Shiite believe in, like the Om Sri cult in Tokyo, engaged in terrorism, that it's their duty to reign in Armageddon. And in my book, the Bible, it is we are to sow good, not be complicit in evil in hopes of bringing Jesus back sooner.
And we're talking about criminal networks who are just as successful in their indoctrination, trauma-based conditioning for children and the families, threatening them. And those, millions of people who are involved now are a legitimate threat. However, I personally feel like when I took a vow for medicine, when I studied medicine, it's a Latin phrase, primum non nocere, which technically translated means above all, do no harm.
I use that. The Hippocratic oath that is no longer relevant, it seems, these days.
I don't think some people that go into medicine do it for the money and the status and the leverage. They don't do it because they want to be with sick people. One of the first days I was in medical school, one of the Chinese doctors said in New Zealand, how many people here want to be among sick people all day and do this as their work?
You gotta have.
And he waited. Yeah. He waited for a minute or two. He said, all of your hands should have gone up if you're in this profession. Excuse me.
Yeah. And for those on the video, seeing the video, you see me duck out of frame there, going back to the whole geishas, as I coin them, a specific sect of Islam that engage in jihadism, global Islamic jihadist interim army soldiers. That's not all Muslims, but as they say, I'm also of German heritage, so I'm very sensitive to the fact that only maybe 10% of Germans were actually Nazis, but look how that turned out, because the other 90% didn't do anything. But I got up to grab this book by Camille Salam. I met him, got this autographed copy of The Blood of Lambs, and he talks about his indoctrination as a youth and his engagement indeed in terrorism till he met Christ.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's quite a few now that have come out. I mean, I think the most effective and articulate speaker at the moment, well, for 10 years at least, has been the one who was the son of Hamas. I believe his book is called The Green Prince. But it's it's the exception rather than the rule, unfortunately. It's very rare that you can undo all that indoctrination, especially if it's been done since you're 2 and 3 years old and generationally. It's the same with cartel families, too.
And it's got to come from within. Like one of my favorite Muslim leaders today is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who just ran for Congress in Arizona. I don't think he was successful, but he wrote the book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam, right? And it's got to come from brethren within the faith to point out the errors and the idiocy that it's not really Quranic, it's extra Quranical, all this hate, because the Quran has Genesis in it. It has Noah in it. We are the people of the book. We are not your enemy. They recognize Jesus as a prophet, not the Messiah, in the Quran. So all this hatred and jihadism is extra Quranical, and they need to hear it from someone in the faith as opposed to me or you saying it. And, we're just coming at it from our own partisan angle. No, they need to hear it from a Zuhdi Jasser, a Camille Salim, or like you said, the Green Prince, having been there and awakened to the idiocy.
Or one of the most effective writers as well as speakers, many people don't know her, but is Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
Oh,
she is,
her.
of course,
love her.
Very effective. Brigitte Gabriel, also, as a journalist who speaks the 3 languages at least. She speaks 4 languages, Arabic, French, Hebrew, and English. So people who speak the languages, lived in that culture, listen to them rather than the pundits who talk about it, who have no idea. Maybe they've been there a few weeks, maybe a few days, and they make a judgment. And so if you want to get back to how I got to go to DOGE.
Like I say, I don't script these shows. Whatever rabbit holes open, we dive down them. But yeah, DOGE is what we're supposed to be talking about now.
It's all right. They're all associatively related. Much of the work I did was also on monitoring evaluation. Now they also call it MEAL, M-E-A-L, monitoring evaluation assessment on learning and education and humanitarian programs. I was also part of the human terrain system with the U.S. Army, where we had specific training and looking at different components of society. And instead of, let's say, the physical terrain, we look at the human terrains, where human beings are in that society in terms of religion, economics, politics, and so forth. And a lot of the monitoring and evaluation that we did with the programs, especially my teammate and I, Lisa Marie Akbari, we went through Army training together and worked in a number of countries together, including Afghanistan over the years. And we were on a USAID $791 million contract for education programs and new books for education in Afghanistan. That was just one of the components of the programs, almost $1 billion.
And that in the macro, I support, but the the details.
No, I don't
support
it.
We're almost $40 trillion in debt, so we can't afford that with the problems we have at home. Again, if you want to do that, and I would agree to do that, if you created a charity to do that, I might donate some money to it. Because again, I am willing to support that in the macro. The problem is it's a scam, it's a dodge for a lot of people laundering money.
Well, it's worse than that. I don't support what I've found in a number of these programs, including with the Peace Corps, including with DOS, the Department of State, is this money, our taxpayers' money, is going to do harm. It's not that it's even going to the programs they say, it's going to criminal networks, terrorist networks. It's going to actually kill and harm the local civilians, the local nationals who do want to have these programs. It's working against those people in leadership who might work for the humanitarian aspect, it's terrible what has been happening. Not only that, they are designed to fail. Why? Because then the administrators will get more money. For example, the program we were on, the 2 years before, they had a $500 million project. And of course, if it doesn't, quote unquote, complete or satisfy its aims and outcomes, then they have to designate even more money for the next few years. It's designed to fail, so the money keeps coming like an ATM spigot for these programs, which are harmful, most importantly to the local national, to us, and using our money in its name. So no, I don't. And part of the reason I was invited to go to DOGE for the opening, and I had contacted Marjorie Taylor Greene's office, and I still have lots of contacts in that area. And I was there because there was there were a number of people. You can imagine last week in Washington, D.C., especially in the foreign aid and quote unquote humanitarian projects areas, with all the quick cease and desist and firings happening, people are panicking, running around with their heads cut off. Certain areas of Washington that used to be very active, even having lunch together in places and so forth, totally dead for a while. I think that it's important to have a pause and a reflect and an audit. A lot of these programs have never been audited. A lot of the contracts, you see, it's not just USAID, because USAID often doesn't even do these contracts. They give them to their friends.
The money to someone else.
Yes, it's especially starting under the Obama administration. It was to no bid contracts. Imagine that. First of all, no bid contracts. So there's no accountability.
$1 million for something I can
much
do
more
for
than
10,000. Yeah.
And a lot of it goes through quote unquote universities. The whole American University in Beirut, in Cairo, in Kabul, in many places in the world are just, they're just conduits for a lot of money laundering or money disappearing, quote unquote, and no audits. And they use the excuse, well, in this country, they don't have the tech, the audits, they don't have those procedures. It's a miasma. We really need to stop it for a while, relook, restructure, and then we can decide, and we can also vote on, do we really want to be giving money to our adversaries? Because that's where a lot of the money has gone to.
Right. Now, let me back up, because we had a moment of minor disagreement, but if I rephrase it, I bet we're back on the same page.
That's all right. We can have different opinions, right?
But
we still live in America.
Educating people abroad or feeding people abroad as a Christian, in the general sense, can support that. What I was saying. But again, from the Christian standpoint, biblical community, rather than worldly communism, theft, and force, if you want to do whatever, either here or abroad, form your own charity. Raise your own funds voluntarily. Stop stealing from the taxpayers. That, I think, we agree on.
I don't know if you saw the president of Nigeria, or the former president of Nigeria, 2 weeks ago now. It went viral, which is I was so happy about, where he talks about, did you see this? Where he said, why are you getting angry at the United States for not giving you money? You've had this money for all these years. What have you done with it? It's the American people. Why would they want to give their money to us? We should be doing it.
Because we are a charitable nation. But again, yes, through charities these should be done, not through our government.
Yes, I mean, if people want to make the trouble is that a lot of these quote unquote foundations and charities, look at the Clinton Foundation, for example.
Bingo!
They get these tax breaks, but they are not doing what they are saying they should be doing.
They collected $1 billion, and Haitians still protest outside the Clinton Foundation. A couple million went to Clinton donors and friends in Haiti, didn't help the Haitian people after they collected $1 billion in the name of earthquake relief. So yes, and I agree with you. I won't give, I think Red Cross blood drives are still a great and noble cause, but I won't give to the Red Cross for that very reason. A lot of it is indeed, they're a profit. Even our healthcare companies that are supposedly nonprofit, they're for profit. There's all kinds of people making profit in them. If a charity can show me through an audit 90% of what's given goes to what they say it does, then I'm supportive. Otherwise, no. That's the same with the DOGE here. I want audits of the charities also.
And given the economic situation in so many countries, especially our own, of most of the people, I'm not talking about the top quote unquote 5 or 10%. I go back
pay
to
most taxes.
I go back to it's I think originally an Italian saying of water your own garden first and then you can water others. So
that's
I believe
America first in a nutshell. America first. Unlike you leftists that constantly try to repeat, it's America alone. It's not. It's America only. It's not. If it was, I wouldn't be part of it.
Yes, well, it's the same of if you are sick, even as a health practitioner, get well first before you treat others.
Oh, it's like the plane analogy I like to use, right? The pre-crash, if it happens, instructions. If there's a loss of cabin pressure, the oxygen masks come down. What are you supposed to do? Affix your own first. Because if you're not able to take care of yourself first, you're one of the ones dying on the ground and can't help anybody else. So take care of yourself first, then you can help others. We are absolutely on the same page again there.
If you don't mind, I would like to talk a little about, for people who want to know absolute details and credible documents about a lot of my work, these are 2 nonfiction books, firsthand. This first one, published by Texas Defiance Press.
For the benefit of the transcript and those on great audio, give the name.
It's called Traveling Off the X by me, JoPatti Monastery.
Has nothing to do with X and Twitter, though.
No, has to do with X as in the military term of getting out of a place of danger.
We got to clarify that, yes. Because again, we are all ignorant of things. That doesn't make us stupid. We are only stupid if we're unwilling to learn about what we don't know. And the other books?
And that's also not only physical danger, but spiritual danger as well. And then my second one, published last year, is called Traveler Between Worlds. It goes more into my spiritual work as well as humanitarian and other work. Again, and the photo on this is from my son, Denali Schmidt. Unfortunately, my son and his father, Marty Schmidt, they perished on K2 in 2013. And we were already divorced by the time he died, but my ex-husband was a United States PJ, U.S. Air Force PJ, Land, Sea, and Air Rescue. And so I talk a little about being in that community as well. And I was named a Texas Artist for Life back in 1999, which I joke means I would be broke for life. It was for my contributions.
That's another scam and scheme, right? If you want to be an artist and actually do art that people will buy for real reasons, not money laundering operations, and survive on the merits of your art. You don't get to get taxpayer funding for your art. Survive on your skills. Whole other subject there.
Yes, a lot of money laundering in art. But so these are 2 poetry books. One is called Kismet. My daughter's, among her other businesses, she's an entrepreneur in publishing, D'Angelo Publications. And then my other one, this is also the front cover, is a painting of my son's. The Traveler Between Worlds was his photograph. And it's called Clash, Poems from Conflict Zones. It's raw and bold and goes into a lot of areas a lot of people don't want to know about because they feel like it's too violent, but I talk about it in a poetic sense, so I hope people can see it in a different way because it is
Right, and
part of what's
deliver
happening
it.
in the world.
Yeah, deliver it
Yes,
in a different form. Well,
yes,
we could talk for 3 days, let alone 3 hours, but I try to keep my shows at least, preferably 30 minutes, but definitely try to keep them under an hour so people don't
yes,
see, oh, a 6 hour discussion. Hats. Right.
true, true.
So, wrapping things up, I don't have for you a website. Do you have
Yes,
a website?
I do. I'm on all the social media just about. My website is JoPattix, JoPattiX.com. I can send you the link, Joseph. And
Oh,
I'm
I wrote it
also
down.
on,
It'll
thank you.
be included in the extended show notes that you can find at Buzzsprout in the transcript for the show. So the link will, and probably when I edit this episode, for those looking behind the scenes, you'll probably see a scroll of your website already up on the screen as I'm babbling now.
Thank you. And also, I'm on Linktree, and that's also on my website, JoPatti X on Linktree, and it has my Substack, YouTube, LinkedIn, all the other social media, Instagram linked there.
Linktree is a great service. I'm
It
also
is.
link
Mhm.
linktr.ee/slash JLenardDetroit. You're linktr.ee/.
JoPatti X. I'll
JoPatti
send you the
X.
links, Joseph, to make it easier for you.
Okay, yeah,
And my Substack is on that as well.
good. Yeah, I just recently, I've had my friend Roger at the Liberty Beacon. I used to write for Red Straight. I used to write for FreedomWorks and Grassfire and all kinds of people before. I left Red State, been on beforeitsnews.com for a while. I also went to thelibertybeacon.com. Roger had a stroke. Unfortunately, I did a thoughts and prayers video exclusive show over that because so many people having health or financial issues need our thoughts and prayers, obviously. But yeah, he
Yes.
had a stroke. So I haven't been on thelibertybeacon.com all year yet. Eventually, I hope to be there as he recovers. So while he's kind of out for the count, I recently joined Substack myself and have been posting stuff there too. I've had many Doge posts. And again, back to the point of kind of like we had, because we're pretty much in agreement. We don't have to agree all the time. I am not a Trump cultist. I did not have Biden derangement syndrome, though, like those on the left have Trump derangement syndrome or Elon derangement syndrome or Doge derangement syndrome. Now, I disagree with him on eliminating the penny, and you could find my article, Eliminating the Penny. I disagree with Trump. Yes, make it of tin and paint it copper. We can't spend 3 cents for a 1 cent coin. Agree. That's waste. But eliminating it, if you're a Christian, does not the mark of the beast immediately come to mind? That's the first step in eliminating our paper and coin money, going to digital, the mark of the beast. They could shut it off. You can't buy and sell. That's the Bible calls for that. How do Christians not see that?
Yes, cash is king. I'm not sure I agree with you with that leap about the penny to BDS and digital, but I'm very opposed to everything being
It's
digital that
that
can easily
slippery
be done.
slope argument that
Mhm.
people always, oh, well, I'm for this. It'll never lead to that. But how many millions of examples do we got to show? We told you so.
Yes, it's terrible to be right about certain things that you prophesize.
Yeah, I
isn't
wish,
it?
oh, so much I wish I could be wrong. And only
Hmm.
time will prove me right or wrong if we
Hmm.
eliminate the penny. But the mark of the beast isn't going to come in like at the snap of a finger overnight. Digital currency just moves us closer towards that ability of control over us.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you very much, Joseph. I've enjoyed our lively conversation here.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if I could, I just mention one more for maybe younger people watching. Is my son was a very spiritual person as well as a very adept athlete and worker and remarkable young man by the time he died at 25. But when he was 17, we were all sports people in our family. My husband, after he was in the military, was an international mountain guide. My daughter does a lot of sports, including, unfortunately, extreme sports like base jumping and alpine
oh,
climbing. Yes, she and her
oh
husband.
boy.
And
She's
yes, you
got
can
a
see my
streak
mother's
of
side.
danger in her.
Of risk, definitely.
Yeah.
And so this was done by my daughter's publishing company. It was the only three-generation project that we worked on. My mother has died fairly in the last few years. She was an editor, so she edited it. I put it together, but it's my son's writings that he did where he learned meditation in order to overcome his fear of doing extreme sports. And he was successful in doing backflips. That's a picture of him doing a backflip in skis. And he did the illustrations when he was only 16 and 17. It's called Zen and the Art of Skiing by Denali Schmidt. My children's names are Denali Schmidt and Sequoia Schmidt. And it was published by my daughter's company. It's a short book with illustrations, and I know a lot of people in sports and young people have commented to me they really enjoyed it.
That's great. I'm glad you filled that in. And I'm glad you said lively discussion. Some would say, I get a little too animated at times and, can blow up on occasion, but that kind of belies who I kind of am now because I have health issues. I've been on disability since 2004. So when you see me on this show or Savaged Unfiltered, I may seem to have a lot of pep, energy, and vigor, but I'm going to need a nap after this. I'm good for short bursts, but I have chronic fatigue immune dysfunction, as well as fibromyalgia and IBS, a whole host of health issues. So what you see here isn't me all day. It's like my friend Michael likes to say, I'm like, my regular life is one thing, but once a camera goes on, I'm like on speed or something. But that's not me. So I'm glad you used the term lively. And yeah, we've gone longer than usual. I hope people will definitely tune in for all the wonderful different rabbit holes we managed to go down. And again, I could talk to you about the first part for 3 hours and definitely talk to you about the DOGE part for 3 days, but we got to have a limit, right?
Basta così, yes.
And again, so JoPatti, I'm not going to attempt your last name. It's
Think of it
JoPatti.
like monastery, like a monastery with a U sound. Monastery. That's it.
Hey, that's great. Name association, verbal, phonetic associations definitely are a help. I always joke with people about their names because of that, right? Like I had Eddie Mann, M-A-N-N, but Eddie Yuda Man, right? There's that silly, stupid helps Yuda Man. Everybody knows that phrase, right? So that
Right.
name association helps people to remember his name. The monastery thing will indeed, it's already working in my brain, monastery. So
yes. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking your energy, now that you've told me a little of your health background, to devote to spreading the word on this medium, and especially the word about anti-Semitism must be addressed, especially with tomorrow probably going to be some very sad news about the Bilbis family coming back.
Again, we're recording
martyred.
on February the 19th to put that
Yes.
in news perspective. And
Yes.
again, hate of any kind. It's like I say about my terror strikes coming soon to a city near you. Again, not just Islamic terror, all terrorism, good and bad, in every culture. Let's realize that, focus on, right? I like to say about that book, it's not about death and destruction, it's about life and living. Hope over fear, faith over despair, positive things. But when people hear a book about terrorism, they automatically think, oh God, death, destruction, it's a spy novel. Not what it's about.
I appreciate you having this platform and inviting me, and I wish you all the best and good health to keep up your energy in your endeavors
I'd probably be better off if I didn't do this, but I feel it important to do this. And I'm glad you became part of this.
Thank you, Joseph.
Take care. God bless.
You too.
The Constitutionalist Politics Podcast, normally in conjunction and corresponding with articles, can normally for the Saturday monologue shows be found at theforgenews.com, SUBSTACK, and find extended show notes including related links in the Buzzsprout episode edition of the transcript. Thank you for having tuned in for Constitutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help. Just wanted to give a brief shout out and thank you to all the folks on iHeartRadio, Player FM, being 2 in the top 3 platforms that my show, Constitutionalist Politics, is most often listened. So thank you all. Take care.